And it looks like we're live. Welcome, everybody, coming from Lisbon, Portugal, at the CC Summit. I've got my on-site buddy there, Christian Friedrich, and I'm Ken Bauer, your virtual buddy. I'll let the people on site, thank you, Christian. I'll let the people on site introduce themselves, and let's get this started.
Hi, I'm Maren Deepwell. I'm work for the Association for Learning Technology in the UK, and this is my first time at the CC Summit.
Hi, I'm Jonathan Ports. I'm faculty at Public University in the United States. This is my second CC Summit.
Okay, hi, I'm Dumam Wat from African Open Science and Airways. So, this is my second CC Summit or something like that. So,
okay.
Okay,
John Okewale on this line, and I'm from Nigeria, and so many other things.
And I'm your on-site buddy for today. Hello, I'm Christian. I work with Wikimedia Germany. And I think it's my first CC Summit, actually. Never been here before. Ken, can you hear us? Are we coming through?
Yeah, you're coming through. I think I had another browser window with the live session streaming.
Ah, okay.
And I was echoing, so sorry.
It's quite psychedelic. So, who's joining us virtually?
I'll introduce myself. I'm Terry Green. I'm at in Peterborough, Ontario right now, and I met Jonathan at last year's CC Summit in Toronto. Hi, Jonathan.
Sorry, I had another browser window open. I was getting a weird echo because I was listening to the delayed stream. Why don't we do introductions with Irene and Nate as well now that Terry did his.
Hi, I'm Irene Stewart, and I'm in Chatham, Ontario right now. I am a faculty member at St. Clair College.
And greetings, I'm Nate Angel. I'm calling you from oddly sunny Portland, Oregon. I don't know what's wrong with us today. And I work with Hypothesis, the nonprofit that makes open source annotation tools.
Thanks, Nate, Irene, and Terry. Ken Bauer, professor here in computer science in Guadalajara at the Tecnológico de Monterrey. I just figured out why I was getting this weird echo, and that's all fixed now. So I know the live stream is working. Back to you on site, Christian.
Thanks, Ken. So do you want to just wrap up what the conference has been like for you? It's the first day. It's a long day, I know, for all of us actually. Some worse than others. So any interesting sessions you've been in so far? Any impressions you want to share?
Well, my first day at the CC Summit's been really exciting. I was really excited about getting some merchandise and getting Portuguese kind of tote bag, which we've been carrying about. I went to a lot of sessions about inclusivity and accessibility today. So I saw some sessions on the Uncommon Leaders project that Kelsey Merkley is running. I also went to a session about visibility for women on Wikimedia, but also then on the wider internet. And I went to a session on teaching teachers digital accessibility as a right and why that's so important, where we looked at a lot of Creative Commons licensed resources that were being collated into a MOOC to do staff development. I've been finding the event really friendly. Everybody seems to be really interested in meeting you, and I've met a lot of different people. So there's about 400 people, I think, some. That's really exciting. So virtually as well as on site.
There was an interesting decision, it seems to me, about the conference this year that there were no keynotes at the beginning. It just sort of started. So, I mean, it was coffee and a little bit of a light breakfast, and then the session started, and it was in many conferences I've been to, maybe every other conference I've ever been to, there's an opening event and someone tries to, set the theme of the conference or something. Whereas because of maybe the day choices, the only sort of keynotes are happening this evening after dinner time tonight, actually. So it was fun to me. I mean, I'm used to this sort of formal setting, but here everyone sort of got to work right away, which was a very kind of we're going to get some work done kind of attitude, which was an interesting way to do it.
Okay. Okay. I attend two particular sessions. The first on opening Africa, and the second on ethics. The second I was supposed to attend is ethics of openness, but I didn't know how the session. But my feeling and what made me glad is the conference seems to focus on particular area, on a specific area like Africa. So that is why I'm very impressed by this summit and the first day. Myself, I'm presenting on Saturday. I have a panel with Florence Piron and Tom from DORG, where we talk about the situation of sharing or diffusion of knowledge in French-speaking African countries, which is an excluded part of Africa, the barrier regarding language. So I'm very excited to share this with people here.
All right. I've actually been involved in a lot of CC things here as well. I'm good. I was part of the Open Education Platform session. So we got to know quite a number of other things that people are doing, Wikidata, and digital library from Norwegian and all that. So it was really, and Ryan was actually part of the session, and he actually asked everybody to do a kind of like introduction in the room to be able to kind of like talk about the projects that they're actually doing. You will find out that almost everybody in that room is doing one thing or the other, and there could actually be where there will be connections. So and part of was someone that spoke about OER map, and we're kind of like looking at how it's possible to have like conferences and programs that are going out across the world that are open education, OER, openness, being available on such platforms, like be able to like get across and say, okay, this is what is going on, should be part of it. Now, thanks to virtually connecting, a lot of things is getting done, but there are so many things that are getting done that we could be part of, but we don't know about. And I think it's high time we have something that could actually bridge that. And then I also learned about the new CC search engine. They are doing quite a number of things on it, and a whole team presented what they've actually been working on. And I'm kind of like curious that because there's OER Commons, I've been using Milo a lot, and there's a lot of other OER stack. So what is CC search engine doing to actually incorporate all of the other platforms into it, so that at the end of the day, perhaps CC search engine should actually be a clearinghouse for all the other open education resources search engines into the process. So that's what I've actually been part of since. And I've met so many people.
That sounds exciting. Why don't I take this pause to let Laura and then Sean introduce themselves as well, and then see if we have any questions for our guests.
Sure. Hi, I'm Laura Pasquini. I'm a senior lecturer at the University of North Texas. I actually have the same questions about the OER Commons and CC Commons too that you just spoke about. So I'm glad that you brought that up, and I'd love to hear more about what's going on there. My work involves teaching around learning technologies and information science, so the intersection of knowledge sharing. So that's why I'm interested in joining y'all this morning. So great to say hi, and yeah, can't wait to hear more.
So I could just drop in and say that not from the side. There in the session where we had the CC search, there was also a short presentation about Wikidata as like one of the biggest OER, so to say, but also a talk about the OER world map. And like me, from like watching from the outside, it was kind of interesting to see how these different approaches kind of seem to make sense alongside of one another, but could also be way more connected, as Jonathan said. But I also got the sense that that's exactly what the next steps for these specific projects might have in mind. So I think that's one of the next steps, that at least that's the kind of the gist that I got from that session. I mean, I know at least 2 people who were in that session as well, if not 3.
They actually asked for feedback from the people that were in the session to actually know, okay, they're releasing, they're moving it off the beta version, and kind of like asking for details about what do you think, what are the things they want people to ask questions about it. And I think now just within this comment and outside, it's kind of like be shared across for people to kind of like go through it, and they should collect responses from people so that they could actually really make use of it in the system. It's very, very important. If you're going to have a system search engine, it should really be something that should bring the community together, not just another search engine.
I'll jump in. I think this is my first virtually connecting session, so if I do it wrong or violate norms, I'm sorry. I usually lurk on these sessions and tremendously appreciate them because I can't get my act together to be on them. So I want to thank everyone who puts them together, and for the on-site people, thank you for sharing everything with us now this time. I'm so interested because I'm a political scientist and the faculty lead for OER at a community college in Brooklyn, and I have been sort of platform and tool, like I've not been as conscious of the development of those things, and I'm sort of slowly coming around to what many of you all have been way more advanced on, the method matters, the search matters, and the connection matters. So I'm really interested to see that that's part of the conversation and that you guys are working and advancing that. So thanks for having me.
Yeah, that's cool.
Thanks, Shauna. And sorry, I thought you'd been on one before. I love that thread about bringing the people in more as opposed to the engines. I don't know if other people have more to talk about that or other topics here.
Well, one thing I was wondering about is, given that the summit is there in Lisbon, would you guys say that the people attending are different than in past summits, or does it seem similar?
I think it's about the same as the one. I was at the one in Toronto last year, and it seems to me it's a very similar group. It's a very international group. There's an annoying prominence of Americans, but it's very, very international, and that's one of the things I like the most. The issues I have and the things I think about, and then people come in with a very different perspective from, other English-speaking countries, but other places around the world with very different issues and perspectives, and I feel like I learn a lot, even with just the most basic introduction to what they're working on. So I think it's about the same group. I was wondering also, maybe there was a few more Europeans than there were in Toronto. It's like, Europe is tiny, right? It's so easy to get. It's tiny, it's so easy to get here.
And you can still travel 16 hours through it, right?
I mean, actually, I've met a lot of European delegates already, and there's probably the people I know the most, and many of us have never been able to go to a Creative Commons summit before because it's never been in our continent before. And so our organizations won't fund us to travel to the US or to the event. So I think there's at least, a good little sort of cluster of European OER scholars who've not been able to attend before. So it's a special privilege to meet, to meet such a global audience and to be able to contribute for us.
It's so nice that Lisbon's right in the center of Europe too.
But regarding Africa, for me there is a big issue. The participants, because many of participants are not able to attend even due to visa issue. And in this kind of event, and many events where I used to attend, is almost the same people that African living in Western country who are able to join this kind of meeting. It's easy for me to join this kind of meeting because I'm living in Canada. Visa is easy for me, but there's a lot of things happening in Africa, but people doing this kind of grassroots work are not able to join due close to visa, this physical barrier.
And we've just had this issue, like in this session, Sadiq Shahadu should actually be with us.
Have you seen him?
I saw him, not yet, but he's on his way here.
Okay.
But it's watching that from the outside or from the inside, actually, like from within the European Union. It's kind of shameful what we as on an administrative level, but also on a governance level, actually put people through to come here, even though I think the European Union is regarded at least as one of the more liberal kinds of supranational like structures when it comes to traveling. Like I don't even want to imagine what he would have gone to if he had to make it to the US, for example.
But I think one thing is this, because I actually came from Nigeria. Going around on most of these things, it's just a function of this that we don't stop moving things. Now that CC Summit has actually come to Europe, then we kind of like start to think of, okay, very soon it should actually come to somewhere like Africa. So that now, he was talking about the fact that, the Americans are here again and all that. But now let's kind of, because what we're talking about it's a global thing.
Right.
It's actually not for a particular region or whatever. I think for us to gain participation and people to kind of like be part of, you really get the voices of people, it needs to go around. So I'm kind of like, that's another perspective to what CCs should actually start to work on and look at how the UNESCOs of this world can actually be part of it to make sure that it actually gets to Africa and other like Asia, Middle East, and all that. So that it will comprise all the global nations that are actually involved in open education. So it's important.
I think it's really interesting, and in thinking about the preponderance of Americans at a lot of conferences, the next OE Global, I think, has solved this in a really creative way. I don't even know if they meant to solve it, but it's American Thanksgiving. So I'm going to predict that there will be a lot fewer Americans at that conference. So finally, we won't take up all the oxygen.
That's a good point.
Thanksgiving in Milano doesn't sound too bad, though, does it?
Oh, it's really exciting.
There'd be a lot of food there.
Also, I would just want to like throw in that what we discussed here, at least from my perspective, and it's my first CC Summit, so I can't really see how that evolved over time. But the issues that we discussed, like the global versus the local, like the focus on which continents, which countries, which regions, which cultural regions maybe, seems to have taken a more prominent place in the discourse all around, but I'm not sure about that. So I'd be interested in your take on that people are discussing these issues more openly than they have 2 or 3 years ago. And I don't only get this from the CC Summit, but also from, like, for example, the OER conference and other discourses that are happening around, like the open movements all around. But it might just be my impression.
Yeah, I'm part of what Commonwealth of Learning that is actually doing. So I've actually been involved in their conferences, and they have aspect of ODL, open and distant learning. So open education comes in very prominently in what they do, and they kind of like bring in, and they are more, into the policy perspective too, not just the content right now. I'm aware of the fact that they've actually COL has actually created a lot of relationship with a lot of countries in the Commonwealth. They get to understand how to integrate OER, setting up the policy, getting open policies and all that. But now I think at some point, all those efforts will kind of like come together and get integrated. We should really have something very, very robust working on. So, but my own take is that when everybody's actually doing their own thing, we don't really put much hours. We kind of like see the intersection and collaborate and actually get things done better.
Okay, for me, the problem with the global versus the local is, for me, from my perspective, is mainly about who decide what's global or local, or at which time, and this kind, what at which time, and yes, that is the two main question, and it depends of the direction you take. So, for if you decide, the globalization can be better if I speak with the African perspective as Africans. If Africans decide to open what they are doing, but it's bad when the Western decide to globalize what they decide in the Western context everywhere. So that is why it's very important to start seeing locally and to educate people, to empower people locally in such a way that they are able to decide themselves what, when, and where to share our knowledge. So that is
I apologize. Let me quickly say something. For what he talked about right now, I was in a conversation with Jason. Jason is, I think, he's present in London, and Leanne is from Open University in the UK. And when I was talking with Jason, I talked about, okay, this is what I'm actually doing in Africa, the kind of like philosophy about openness and against being closed. Now, what happened was this. After I finished talking, Jason said, practically, this is the same problem that they have in the US. He worked in Oakland and not the Bay Area for quite a while. So he was actually able to pinpoint the fact that these are the same issues that they are having in the US. So now, from a perspective, if we kind of like engender conversations like this, we discover that now our issues are actually not far apart. But the problem is because we are not having an opportunity to actually bring things to the table every time. That could actually be one of the militating factors. But if we understand, if we kind of like get into conversation, we could actually realize, because I was talking about what it is for people to get reorientated into being open. Because now we're open, then definitely there's something called closed. If we come from the open source, open software, the software platform, and you have the closed proprietary sources, then you have the open sources. So if you kind of like bring that same idea into education, you definitely know that traditionally education was proprietary and perhaps closed, and that's where we have open. So, and when you want to kind of like change the paradigm, then you've got to reorientate people and change their philosophy about what it is to do education, and that's a problem in Africa that I came from. So when I talked about it, and Jason said, yeah, I was in that, and I kind of like see the problem. So it's more like, let's get to the table and let's have a conversation. So Africans, Asians, Americans, now by the time we start to really get on the conversation, we kind of like start to see that our issues are not really distance apart. We just need to kind of like start to like get, okay, where does it really affect you and what should we do? What's the peculiar things there?
Just to drop in really quickly again, Maren said hi. She said earlier that she had to leave at like 5 minutes before 4 around here. So No offense.
And how are you doing for time, the rest of you there? I wanted to be conscious of that.
I've got time. Yeah, we've got time.
Another 5 minutes or so, maybe.
Sure.
Sure.
Yeah, what I take from these conversations, just as a quick drop in, that it's, at least from my perspective, but like what you describe is that there seemed to be, and there still is, I think, a mantra that we have to open up everything and we decide, like, and nobody really asked who the we is in that. But it becomes more a conversation about who decides when to open what and where, like to make it more contextual and to make it more, to acknowledge that people should decide on their own and not just come in and barge in and say, we're opening this up for you, this is much better.
So there was this year there have been some sessions that they call lightning talks, where there'll be a bunch of short presentations all on a fairly nearby topics. And I went to the session on ethics of openness, lightning talks, and there was a very short presentation by a woman from Los Angeles who had just come in today, so she was a little jet lagged. But she was talking about exactly this issue about sort of consent for openness, that when a lot of people are trying to, again, I shouldn't speak too gently. In the U.S., there's a lot of discussion right now of open pedagogy, and open pedagogy being your students should do all of their work on the open web, and they should hand in their English papers should be put on a website, and their comments should all be done in a public hypothesis group, and all of their work should be in the open. And there's a question of whether the students really always understand what that means, and whether they really are able to. You may be, I've done some experiments like that. I've had the experience where the students, I say to them at the beginning, this is all going to be on the web. And they say, I'm a young person. And then, like I had a student who built their own, they each had their own domain. And I said, we spent an hour talking at the very beginning, what's the name of your domain going to be? And one of the students chose as the name of his domain was justinthestud.com. And I said to him, this is going to be your public persona on the World Wide Web. That's the whole world is going to think you're a stud. Do you really want that? And he said, yeah. And then 2 weeks later, when we were going to present the final work of this project also to the president of my university and some of the big other people, he became embarrassed because he realized that he was going to have this identity then in that context. So there's all a lot of discussion about sort of what is openness and who gets, and whether people are able to understand what it means to be open. And whether as a professor I should require them to be open, or whether I can give them other ways of participating in these activities. That was an interesting discussion.
Any comments from the virtual end of this conversation?
I would agree that I think the balancing of the rights versus personal data, privacy, and that's publicness is becoming more of an issue in the open, especially when we think about open versus CC and licensing. And I think there is a lack of awareness for some on the spectrum of what that information literacy and fluency looks like. And I think we need to think more about that, as identity means a lot more these days with open. And so I think back to the article around Flickr. We've all created openness and put pictures out there, but to what ends, and what uses the machines are using them now for AI and machine learning and algorithms that are going to map facial recognition software now. So I have some questions about where that's coming up in this conference, and not to be the negative person on the side, but what have we done, or what can we do to best inform our learners, but also ourselves, practitioners, educators, faculty, researchers, with some of the work we're doing.
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. I mean, the thing I can say to my students, think about this, not just here, not just in this classroom, but globally. But, as you point out, things change, technology changes, right? Some image I put up of myself doing one thing, maybe 5 years from now, I will be embarrassed that it's still up there, and I will not want to be used as data for some machine learning algorithm in the future. And I think that's a really, it's very hard to, I personally have always had the philosophy, I put everything that, I'm not embarrassed. If I make a mistake in something, if I do something silly, it's what I am. But it's easy to say that.
Yeah, and it's not embarrassment, but it's about what other people's, our good intentions is some other people's bad intentions elsewhere. And that's my more concern is, like, I could care less. Like, I'm here just out of the shower and I give you a 0 whatever about what I look like and where my image goes, but that's all. About, and I'm glad the GDPR is there for the EU because it's made software companies, although we don't have to comply in the US, but other people can ask and say, could you remove me from X, or can I have my personal data that you have taken down? So I'd like to see some other policy conversations come in, and I know there's a segment on legal in that area, but I think that would be really important to talk a bit more about what that means legally for data, for information of self.
Yeah, excellent point.
So I just come off as a shameless self plug, not a shameless shelf plug. I don't even know what that is. But we're doing a session tomorrow with Mahabali, Taskeen Adam, and Christina Hendricks here. We're under the Towards Openness realm and the Break Open thing. And I think there is at least a visible strand of talk about ethics here at the conference. And I think this is being framed also as an ethical issue. And I think you can discuss whether that's the only perspective that you want to take on this. But I think it at least has a visible part here at the conference to tackle these issues. I don't think there is enough conversation about like whose privilege that is, but I'm also looking forward to tonight's keynote when the actual theme and the topic will be around the Whose Knowledge Project. So I think lots of these issues that we are just like slightly discussing right now might be come up with a bit more substance tonight. That was my shelf plug.
No, it's an excellent plug. No, I love this conversation. I'm typing in the side chat here. Yeah, I think what Laura says and Shauna is saying as well, it's really important for us to think about agency. Shauna wrote, I just wrote consent for openness in all caps on a Post-it note for her wall. And that's so important that we have these discussions with our students. I've been doing this with my students for a few years, so I really need to think about it. My picture just showed up in a Brian Alexander talk in Nebraska, and a colleague emailed me saying, hey, I think that was Mr. Bauer in the photo. And he said, oh, you know Ken's great. Brian Alexander, typical hug came out. But these things live forever. And we need to be careful about what we're exposing. And I'm remembering Jess Mitchell, and I was reviewing her session from Open Ed on virtually connecting, because I just did an interview with her this week. And she and others talked a lot about how we're forcing things into the open that other communities, and especially Indigenous communities, don't want us to be putting in the open. And we got to be really careful about that.
So from a practical point of view, like I wear two hats, right? I sit in this realm and think about like openness and the ethics and trying to move towards open pedagogy and moving my students in that direction. And then I like leave my tiny office and I go teach 4 or 5 sections of 30 to 50 students per section, trying to cover all of the content that we have. So I struggle a lot with trying to figure out, we want to move in this direction, but I want it to be an informed move for students, but I need to do a whole lot of background. And then also we have to cover the US Constitution. So it's the other side of that, and it doesn't excuse that. It's just another layer of difficulty to figure out, understanding it myself, incorporating it for my students, and finding the time in a course to manage it.
We can pretty much open mic. You got anything to add as well? Irene, you've been there and silent for a long time. I want to make sure I'm including everybody.
I like being silent. I like to lurk a little bit in the background and find out what's going on. I'm very, very new to OER, Creative Commons licensing. I'm like a babe in the woods. This week, my first course is happening that's based on an open education resource that I wrote with a partner. We're very, very young at this, so I'm just taking everything in, making notes, trying to learn some of the terminology and the topics. So I appreciate the opportunity to be here.
Well, congratulations on starting that new course.
With 1,200 students.
Oh, wow. Wow.
Good luck.
That's a whole other issue, but I have help. I'm not alone.
Wow. Yeah.
I'm being an ungracious host. I'm busy typing. How are we doing for time there, Christian? I want to be careful that we're not holding you back from sessions.
Since we have to, this is our break now, and I'm already quite thankful. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to say, but it's somebody's mom's birthday, I heard.
Yeah, it's my mom's 75th birthday today.
So
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday.
yeah.
He's back.
I'll share that out with her later.
No, but I think we're like, at least on the home stretch. I don't know if there's any final comments from you folks here on site.
Yeah. Well, I still think of very much that, like I was discussing with Jason the other time, that partly because Irene is just coming on it right now. So the philosophy behind openness needs to be talked about more, because a lot of people are actually getting into doing things in the open and not understanding what it really means to actually be there. And it's kind of like when they get into a kind of a level, they kind of like oh, this is not what I subscribe for and all that. So, but there needs to be a kind of like a paradigm shift into, okay, you're not, when you're going to open, you're no more closed, and you need to understand how that works. You know, the different nuances that kind of like brings across. You know, it's very, very important, and I think that should be one of those things. So it's very into kind of like the ethics issues and all that, but people must have the mindset that they're actually changing the whole system of what they're doing, so that they can actually get things more done in the open. It's the final one.
You know, there's one thing I could mention was I consume a lot of lectures and sessions. I haven't been to a lot of virtually connecting sessions from home, but I watch a lot of recorded video of keynotes and seminars and things. And the one thing that's different about being on site is to see the entire group around you. And there was one of the sessions this morning where everyone spoke for like 10 seconds just to say who they were and what they were working on. And sort of at the end of the session, there were maybe 40 or 60 people. And I sort of almost had tears in my eyes because every single one of them was doing something interesting that I would love to sit down and have a coffee and talk to them for an hour. So sometimes when I'm at home, I feel a little bit isolated, and this community, it's open, but it exists only through this little window onto the internet. But there really are real people who are doing these things. There's a movement here, and there's a lot of energy, and that's the thing. You know, every once in a while, it's fun to go to these things in person because you get the feeling that you're not living in isolation. I'm not the only person in my time zone who cares about this.
Okay. My final comment is just that there is a book, Contextualizing Openness, edited by Leslie Chan, and I have a chapter inside in this book. So the book will be released this year. Wow. So you can take a look on it. So, and one thing I'm thinking, looking openness, Creative Commons, licenses, intellectual property. It is so weird to see how we have different representation, and I'm very like to see all these difference between people, how people are in Latin America, in Africa, in Europe, in North America, how the representation, the perspective of what is copyright in regarding their how its impact in other countries and how the representation can influence other representation. I'm thinking about this kind of thing actually, and it's very exciting.
Yeah. I think my just quick final comment would be especially if you're interested in different perspectives on this, one thing that I usually recommend is I think was that OpenCon 17 when you were on the panel with
Yes.
The Open Con 17 panel with Tara Robertson, Thomas Bois. I think Leslie Chan was moderating it or hosting it.
No,
Wasn't she?
Last year.
I'm not sure. I might be mixing up two
17 in
channels.
Berlin, no, Leslie Chan was not there.
Okay, then I might be mixing up two panels. But the one that you were on with Tara kind of gave 4 very different perspectives on whose open this actually is, and that was really powerful for me to like dive deeper into.
Yeah, I got my mic unmuted. Thank you so much, Christian. That's a great resource to share with everyone. I think we're pretty well wrapping up here. I want to say thank you to everyone. I like some comments there, Jonathan, that you were saying about the window. The Be-Connecting community is really an important part of a lot of our professional lives. We made so many contacts. I've seen Laura so many times just via Connecting. So it does create a community, and that's part of what we're doing. And I invite those that are watching this afterwards to come closer to us and approach us. We're very friendly and be part of this community. And welcome, Shauna. I was sure you were on one before. Thank you for joining.
I think I was on site once before, but
Yeah,
I had no idea what I was doing.
Okay. Excellent. Well, thank you everyone for joining us from Lisbon for CC Summit. We have another session or maybe 2 now that are coming up, possibly tomorrow and Saturday, if Christian can correct me.
No, I think that's right. We're still making the plans for 1, maybe 2 sessions tomorrow, and there's one on Saturday that is definitive at 5 p.m. local time.
Drop in closer to the camera there, Christian.
Yeah.
Cool. Now I can screen cap that. Awesome. Thank you. Have an excellent day, everyone, and an excellent rest of the week. I thank you all for joining us. I'm going to hit the stop broadcast button now.
Thanks. Nice to meet you all.
Thank you.
Bye.